Good afternoon. It is an honor for me to present and share the spirit and the innovation that tribes in the Northwest are bringing to climate change efforts. And I want to thank the conference organizers for asking me here today, and also to thank the tribal leaders and staff and scientists that really have informed my understanding. Tribes in the Northwest and beyond face complex and profound impacts to tribal culture, sovereignty, and economies. And as we've talked about the impacts over the last 2 days, it is the cultural perspectives that I hope to share with you today, and to inspire you to seek out the tribes in your area, in your region, that are doing this work on climate change. The presentation will cover the issues and ideas that are included in the Northwest Climate Assessment and the National Climate Assessment, and also a forthcoming special issue of the Climatic Change Journal that addresses climate change and Indigenous peoples in the US. And it is very significant that the National Climate Assessment, the Northwest Climate Assessment, and this special issue address tribal issues. That hasn't happened in previous assessments, or it's been, a few pages here and there, but there are now dedicated chapters and dedicated issues. And so I really encourage you to seek those out. And the last thing I want to say in terms of my introduction is that this presentation is not representative of what tribes are doing. It is a snapshot. It is examples. But every tribe is unique. Federally recognized tribes are sovereign, and as such call for that outreach and government-to-government interaction. Also, the Pacific Northwest Tribal Climate Change Project is a collaboration with the University of Oregon and the Forest Service Pacific Northwest Research Station, and it's also what informs this presentation, and is really aimed to build an understanding of the needs and issues tribes face in the context of climate change, and to build a voice and engagement opportunities for tribes to be a part of the range of climate change issues and initiatives in the Northwest. Before I get into a set of examples of what tribes are doing in the Northwest, I want to offer some perspectives. And the first perspective is that of tribal sovereignty. Tribes are tied to their homelands in the United States by law and by culture. And yet, climate change has no interest in geographic or political boundaries. And in other words, if tribes want to retain access to cultural resources and manage for culturally important species that are off reservation or beyond treaty and reserved rights, the government-to-government relationship is crucial. And with that comes collaboration. It has to be hand in hand. And there also need to be a clear mechanism for how information is exchanged between tribes and public agencies and other non-tribal entities that protect culturally sensitive information. And I think this is a very important consideration in engaging tribes in climate issues. The second frame I'll offer is that of reciprocity, which can refer to the relationship that tribes have with the earth, with the land, the air, the water, with species and ecosystems. And it is fundamental to how many tribes consider their contributions to climate change and what kind of adaptation or mitigation strategies that they may use in climate change initiatives. And the final frame I'll offer is that of traditional knowledge. Traditional knowledge isn't just historical data. It is an indigenous way of understanding the changes to species and ecosystems and ecological processes. And while it offers great potential, and there's so much excitement I hear about bridging traditional knowledge and Western science, and it really can help in informing how tribes understand potential climate impacts and also the outcomes from adaptation strategies, it must be protected. It must be through tribal rights to control access to and use of that knowledge. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that's coming into play in different initiatives in the Northwest, but it's a very important consideration as agencies move forward in exploring the role of traditional knowledge with tribes in the Northwest. There are a number of different climate change initiatives underway among tribes in the Northwest. I'm going to offer some examples, but I know I've already missed some. Right after I sent the presentation in for this, I downloaded the Jamestown Sklallam adaptation plan, which was just released. So I don't have a slide on that one, but again, this is just to remind you all that it's not representative, that every day there are new tribal initiatives underway. The first I'll start with is the Swinomish, which I think a few presenters have talked about. In 2007, Tribal Council made a proclamation to address climate change in response to growing recognition of what the potential impacts may do. And in 2009, the tribe released a technical assessment, and in 2010, an adaptation plan. And I think that their efforts highlight the role of partnership. They worked with Climate Impacts Group and Skagit County and many others to do this work. Their framework is cross-sectoral, and they look at a range of sectors, including emergency management and infrastructure and public health, and they also look deeply at culture. Most recently, the Swinomish tribe has partnered with the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation in British Columbia through a grant that they received from the North Pacific Landscape Conservation Cooperative and Northwest Climate Science Center to look at community and environmental indicators in the context of climate change. And this was part of a grant that the North Pacific Landscape Conservation Cooperative initiated to explore the role of traditional knowledge in climate change. Another example is the Suquamish tribe, also in Washington State. And they've had a range of efforts to start looking at the impacts from increasing pollution and habitat degradation and how to look at climate change. And in 2012, they surveyed tribal members, and over 80% indicated that ocean acidification was one of their primary concerns. And as such, the Suquamish tribe is now developing K-12 curriculum, and they're engaging tribal youth in raising awareness about ocean acidification locally and even in national forums. The Nooksack Indian tribe, also in Washington State, there's an excellent poster in the back, have been partnering with the Environmental Protection Agency Region 10 Office of Research and Development to look at climate change in context of temperature, TMDL, and as climate analyses have indicated, increases in stream temperature and decreases in stream flow during critical seasons for spring Chinook salmon, they have started to look at restoration strategies. In the near term, have installed over 100 log jams, but are looking at what are the most feasible and effective ways of addressing the potential for climate change on cultural resources. The Tulalip tribes have a very integrated ecosystem approach to looking at climate change, and their goals have been very much to protect cultural resources and to plan for what they see as inevitable alterations to their landscapes and their ecosystems. The Tulalip tribal leader Terry Williams and Preston Hardison, who's a staff with Tulalip tribes, have also been at the forefront of examining the roles of traditional knowledge and ensuring free, prior, and informed consent for the use of traditional knowledge in climate change initiatives, again, both nationally and internationally. Moving down into Oregon, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation for many years have focused their natural resource management programs and their engagement with federal and other non-tribal partners through their First Foods program, looking at protecting culturally important species and bridging that into much of their work, again, in natural resource management and climate change and in public health. The Coquel Indian tribe on the south coast of Oregon, their tribal council felt very strongly about the need to address climate change, and yet they lacked resources, any dedicated resources to do so, and so they passed a proclamation to integrate climate change within their strategic plan update, and every department was tasked with understanding climate change impacts on that department and how they would move forward. They've also partnered with a graduate student at the University of Oregon who's bringing together tribal youth and tribal elders to use community and tribally led photography to document observed and potential impacts from climate change on cultural resources. And then most of these examples have been about adaptation, but there are tribes also innovating around renewable energy as well. The Lummi Nation in Washington State has developed a strategic energy plan, and their goals have included reducing their own contributions to climate change and also achieving energy self-sufficiency. And they are doing so through a geothermal heat pump, through solar lighting, through feasibility studies for wind energy potential. The Siletz Tribal Energy Program, the Siletz is here in Oregon, have also been focused on developing a community renewable energy program. Both of these projects were funded in part through Environmental Protection Agency Showcase Communities. And the very last example I'm going to give is that of tribal engagement in two federal programs. The Northwest Climate Science Center has engaged tribes through their Executive Stakeholder Advisory Committee, bringing in Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians, and the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, and also through a tribal engagement strategy. And the North Pacific Landscape Conservation Cooperative has incorporated tribes in their organizational structure and the very foundation for how they move forward with a tribal First Nations committee and with dedicated funding to support tribes to do work on climate change. And they have really been a model for a number of other landscape conservation cooperatives across the country. The considerations that I wanted to leave you with are things that I've talked about, but the tribal participation in every aspect of understanding climate change through research, through assessments, through policy, through planning, it has to be through government to government and meaningful collaboration hand in hand. That, again, climate change is not going to adhere to what we have thought of in the past around political boundaries, and that we need to ensure that tribes have opportunities to be a part of how policies and programs are developed. And what I wanted to leave you with is this idea that Daniel Wildcat, who is a scholar at Haskell Indian Nations University and really a leader in tribal climate change issues, a term he's coined, indigenuity. And he asks, who better is there to lead in this dramatic time of climate change than those who have the indigenous knowledge to recollect, to understand their strategies, and use indigenous ingenuity or indigenuity. And the other thing I wanted to point out in this quote here is he asks us to imagine a world where nature is understood as our relatives, not just as resources. And I think that this idea, again, about how to inspire us to use science in planning, but also to bridge knowledge and science and find where those pathways lead us, I find very inspiring, and I hope you will too. So thank you very much.